In this lesson, we'll cover the concepts of versioning and release. Our objectives for this lesson are as follows: describing the concept of versioning in the configurator model's work area, how to release a workspace, describe how concurrent drafts are affected with release, explain how existing models are impacted when a workspace containing a snapshot or referenced model is released, and unrelease a model and put its previous version into production. Our first section discusses the concept of versioning in the configurator model's work area. This diagram highlights the last step in the lifecycle of a configurator model, the release. The model is not released by itself, but as a participant of a workspace that is released. In this lesson, the focus is to look in greater detail at releasing a workspace. As discussed before, building a model involves adding supplemental structure, defining rules, creating UIs, and then editing and testing them as needed. After testing is successful, the workspace can be released so that the changes in the workspace are made available for use in a transactional application, such as order management. Before the workspace is released, the model in the workspace is referred to as a draft. When a workspace is released, new versions of any models in it are created. We will look at the details of what a version means for a configurator model. A version of a model is its definition during a specified time period. The definition is made up of item and supplemental structure, rules, and user interfaces. The version is set when a workspace with its participant is released and the version number of each participant is incremented. The diagram shows the following example. We see the car model going through changes where some structure is being added or deleted through the various versions. In version 1, the packages option feature is added, which contains the base trim and luxury options. In version 2, another option, super luxury, is added to the packages option feature. Finally, in version 3, the base trim option is deleted and the sports option is added to the packages option feature. For reference, the only workspace participants that are versioned are models. By design, supplemental structure, rules, and user interfaces are actually part of the model itself. When a workspace containing models is released, the models are versioned. A version is different from a copy in the way the data is managed. There is no duplication of data in a version, unlike the data in a copy. In versions, only the delta changes for each version are stored. In the configurator model's work area, the start date of any version is the effective start date of the workspace that contains the model that is versioned. When you create a workspace and add a model that has already been released in another workspace to the new workspace, you are working on a draft of that model that is based on the release version, which is considered the baseline version for your model draft. Remember that when a model is imported from PIM the first time, it is automatically released and its first version, which is referred to as version 0, is created. Any changes that you make in that workspace are now tracked as changes on top of the baseline version. None of the changes to a draft appear in production until the workspace is released. Versions are dynamic and cumulative. They are dynamic because their baseline can change as other versions are released, and they are cumulative because the latest version accumulates all the prior released changes. This diagram depicts the following example. You have a model that you just imported from PIM. Version 0 of the model was released by virtue of that import. Now, you create a workspace named WS1 and add version 0 of that model to the workspace. You add 10 supplemental nodes, 8 rules, and 2 UIs to the model in the workspace WS1. Next, you release WS1 with an effective start date of the month from today. A new version of the model is created when WS1 is released. We'll call it V1 or version 1. Now, you realize that you must make a fix to the model and release that fix a month after version 1 has been created. So, you create a workspace named WS1Fix and add the model to the workspace. The baseline version of the model is V1. Now, you add one supplemental node, delete a node, and edit a rule. Then, you release WS1Fix with an effective start date of 2 months from today. A new version of the model is now created when WS1Fix is released. We'll call it version 2, or V2. From this point on, if you create a new workspace with a start date beyond that of WS1Fix and add the model to the new workspace, version 2 will be the baseline version of the changes to the model. Our next session discusses how the release process works. This screenshot highlights the release button and the status field. Now that we've looked into what a version is, let's see what the release means and what it entails. To release a workspace, you click the release button on the page on which you are working with your workspace. Releasing a workspace is a scheduled process. When the release action is invoked, the process is scheduled and started. All the unmodified participants in the workspace are affected when the workspace is released. Before the scheduled process is started, an analysis of impact is also performed. So, what is the extent of impact that is checked? Assume that the workspace that is being released contains a snapshot with an item that is being indated. This snapshot is used in other models that are already in production. There are rules in those other models that work now, but will not work after this workspace is released. All this information will be presented to the product configurator manager who intends to release the model. As release is a scheduled process, after the release button is clicked, you need to click the refresh button to display the latest status of the release process. While the process is running, the status is release in progress. After the workspace is successfully released, the status is displayed as released. If there are any errors during the release operation, the workspace is put back into development status so that the PCM can fix any errors. The list of all workspace participants that can be included in a release is shown in the slide. All of them will go into production on release. You previously learned that releasing snapshots can potentially have an impact on other models that is being currently released. The participants in a workspace are released only if you have added models to the workspace for the purpose of testing, but have not yet made any changes to them since the time they were last released as part of another workspace, you will be warned that they have not been changed and they will be removed from the workspace when it's released. This section discusses how a concurrent draft development is a useful tool and how the baseline versions are changed when one of the workspaces is released. We learned about concurrent development in the workspaces lesson. This diagram depicts an example of what might happen. Assume you have just released WS1 model on top of the baseline version 0. You are already planning for the next release of the model, so you have created WS2 and added the model to it. You have also started work, adding rules and making some UI changes towards the next release. The end users that started to use V1 of the model in production complain about an issue they are seeing and it needs to be fixed sooner than later. So, we create a new workspace, WS1 Fix, with an effective start date as early as today, add the model in question to the WS1 Fix workspace, work on the changes that you need to fix the issue reported by the end users, and test and release WS1 Fix. So, will this release affect anything in WS2? Let's see. Continuing from our example on the previous slide, let's consider the following points. One of the workspaces is released and the other two have draft versions of the models. When WS2 and WS1 Fix were created and the model was added, the baseline version of the model, called V1 in this example, was added to these workspaces while you were working on the changes in WS2. As there was a need for a production fix, the workspace WS1 Fix was created. The changes for the fix were made and WS1 Fix was released before WS2. Now, the version of the model released with WS1 Fix is called version 2 in this example. So we ask the question, would this change anything in WS2? This is what happens to the draft in WS2. For that draft is changed from version 1 to version 2, and the work that you did in WS1 Fix is automatically reflected to the model draft in WS2. As a result, you don't need to do anything manually in order to bring the WS1 Fix's changes into WS2. This section will discuss the effects of releasing updated models on models that are already in production. Just like a single snapshot of any item in the configurator model's work area, there is only one version of a configurator model for a model item at a given point in time. This diagram illustrates that if a referenced model is referred to by multiple parent models, all of them are using the same version of it. To continue, an example of how multiple parents use the same reference model. There are different car models that use the same engine assembly model. The shared use is a significant advantage in terms of and maintenance of the referenced relationships. Just like a snapshot, the release of a reference child model could impact the parent models that are referring to it and already in production. If there is more than one being released, each model is versioned independently. This applies to the reference models as well. The diagram depicts the following example. You have a classic sedan car model which refers to the engine assembly model. You created WS1 and added both these models to it, and you added supplemental structure, rules, and UIs to these models. Then, you released WS1, creating a new version of each of these models, SV1 for the sedan and EV1 for the engine. Now you had to create another workspace, WS1 Fix, to make a production fix. You added both the models to the workspace. The baseline versions used by the drafts in WS1 Fix are SV1 and EV1 for the sedan and the engine respectively. However, the fix involved making changes only to the sedan. The engine model was not touched, so when WS1 Fix is released, the engine is removed from the workspace and version SV2 of the sedan is released. Now, a coupe is being added to your product line and it uses the same engine model as the sedan. You created a workspace, WS1 Coupe, to build a coupe model and also to make some changes to the engine model. You have added the classic sedan model to the workspace because you wanted to test and ensure that the changes to the engine will not break anything in the sedan model. You complete the changes and release the workspace WS1 Coupe. Now, the engine model has a new version, EV2, in production, and the coupe model has its own version, CV1, as well. The sedan model was unchanged, so it was removed on release without creating a new version. Releasing a reference model or an impact the existing models that are being used in production performs an analysis of possible impacts into the log of the schedule process for the release operation. This diagram depicts the following example. The classic sedan is a version of the referenced model engine. In the classic sedan model, a rule refers to one of the engine type options of engine. The rule text is base trim implies engine type 2.0 turbo. The engine type option referenced in the rule is end dated 2 months from today. Then, a workspace is released that contains the following: a new snapshot of the engine model that includes the end dated option, and the rule referring to the end dated option. The impact analysis for the release operation detects the effects of the end dating on the rule. The schedule processes the impact in its log file. Then, the release operation updates the rule so that it will become invalid upon the end date of the engine type option, and it sets the end date field for the rule's definition in the configurator model. When the rule becomes invalid, it is ignored at runtime. By analyzing the impacts of releases, the release process is able to help you to avoid later order errors or unexpected exceptions. Nonetheless, it's always a good practice to add all the impacted models to the workspace and the model with changes or a snapshot change is being released. The final section discusses the effects of releasing updated snapshots or reference models on models that are already in production. It may be possible that you inadvertently released a model into production. You then scramble to correct the changes, test them, and then release them again, which may take a significant amount of time. It may be possible that in the interim, invalid orders may be submitted, which may further compound the problem. Release the latest version of the workspace participant models to revert to the previously released version of the model. This allows business operations to continue with. As a note, models released in the past cannot be unreleased. Only model space can be unreleased. In a demonstration, I'll show you how to release a workspace and access the model in the release workspace from order management. But before we do that, let's take a quick summary of our topics. From this lesson, you should have an understanding of how to describe the concept of versioning in the configurator model's work area, release a workspace, describe how concurrent drafts are affected with release, and explain how existing models are impacted when a workspace containing a snapshot or reference model is released. And that concludes our topic. In this brief demonstration, we'll talk about how you release a workspace so that your end users can access the model in integrated applications in the production environment. So I'll release the workspace that I've created and used within this course. So if I go into product management and the configurator models, here is my workspace, which is still in development. So I'll click on it to access it. I'll start by generating the pre-release report. So to do that, I'll go up to the top of my UI, click the arrow next to release, and then choose the option, Generate Pre-Release Report. The system returns a confirmation that the process has been initiated, and it gives me my process ID. I can use that to check on the progression of the job by going into the schedule processes. So I'll click OK. Now I'll navigate over to our schedule processes. So if I click Done, I can go back to my home page, then use the navigator to go to my Tools section, then into Schedule Processes. Here we can see the job that I executed. So there's the workspace pre-release report, and the status is succeeded. Below my job, we can see the process details, including the schedule information, log, and output. So here we'll review the report through the attachment. So I'll click on my link. The system has generated my log file, which is text. So depending on your settings, I could either open it with a browser or I could save it to a text file. I'll go ahead and save this to a text file. We can review it real quick. So I'll click OK. Log file. So here's the example of the log release function creates this report which contains all the impacts of an actual release, but it stops short of actually releasing the workspace. So this allows your administrators to review the report, analyze the impacts. Otherwise, once they're satisfied with the results, they can close this, navigate back into the workspace, and then perform the actual release. So in mine, you don't really see a whole lot of information, and it's modal, and I can't enlarge it for the screen application. Just one thing to point out here, you'll notice it does have a warning, and that's because within my model name, the car engine, it's just recognizing that in this particular modification, there was no changes made to that particular node within my configurator model. It's not been modified, so it's saying it will be removed from the workspace on release. So if you recall from earlier conversations, when you're versioning, if a has not been modified within that version, then it doesn't need to override it. It just retains the original node that appeared in the version before. So that's all it's saying here. So let's close this and let's go back to my model. I'll navigate back to my model. So going into configurator models, clicking on my workspace, then within my workspace, we have the release function at the top. I'll click dialog box with a warning. So again, similar to what we saw in our log that was generated with the pre-release report, it's just saying the workspace will be released with an effective start date based off of the date I've specified. And there's an additional message below, which is again is just reiterating that the car engine node has not been modified, so it will be removed on this versioning upon release. So in other words, it does not need to replace the car engine node that was there before because no changes were made to it. So depending on the warning or errors, obviously you would fix those, make changes before you continue. So in this case, I'll go ahead and click yes to continue. So the system generates my process ID, which I've noted. So again, we can check for the progression and completion of that. I'll click OK. We'll go back to our processes, scheduled processes. I'll hit refresh. There's my release workspace, and we'll continue until it's completed. So the release process is completed now. It does show a status of warning, again, just because of the message indicating that the one node would not be released as part of this versioning, only because, but that's fine. So everything is okay. And we can go back and verify the status in my actual workspace. Navigate back. We'll go into our setup area under product management, then configurator models. You'll notice my workspace is no longer in development because it's been released, and we can verify. If I go into the task and manage models, I can search by name, and I've accidentally gone into the manage models instead of my workspace. So for my taskbar, instead of managing models, I meant to go into manage workspace. So again, let's search by that naming convention. So there's my workspace, again indicated by my student number at the end, and we can see that the status has now been released. So I could go back into it, and again, shows me basically released, my process ID, effective start date. If I need to drill down and see my details, obviously they're still there as well.